Hello, my name is Paul Arnold. I'm a qualified psychotherapist and also a trained coach. And today's session is really talking about strengthening self-esteem, call it self-confidence, call it self-belief. Now, this is one of those sort of big topics, and this is only just scratching the surface of the whole topic. And I'm going to sort of share with you some sort of theories and also some tips and strategies to help. And many of those strategies and techniques are very sort of behavioral, very cognitive. And I think actually the reality is the psychotherapy room is much more where we can deal with the emotional content of what actually sits behind the lack of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, and I'll definitely be saying at the end about how I see that psychotherapy can work in that space, because very often it's the emotional space that the issues were first created in. So let's get going. Look, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-belief holds us back in relationships, in our jobs, in realizing our potential. And in many ways, I would suggest that basically it defines what you get out of life and to a degree what you don't get out of life. Now, there's lots and lots of theoretical work on this stuff. And I just want to mention a guy called Gregory Bateson, who's got this sort of model, logical levels. And, the most important logical level that he talks about is identity, who we see ourselves to be. Underneath that, we have our beliefs and our values, very often about what we believe about ourselves. And then underneath we have capabilities, and then we have behaviors, and we also have environmental factors. And what we find from all that stuff is that it's who we see ourselves to be, and our beliefs we have are much more powerful drivers of our behavior than our actual capabilities. And we know from all the great work that's been done that, it's our very earliest stages of our life that basically we get what I call introjected scripts given to us about how we have to be in the world to be accepted, and then out of that we create our own, as Bowlby talks about, the internal working model. What's our model of the world about how does a person like me survive in a world like this with people like that around me? And so we obviously have these external critics, and particularly if they're very important to us, then we swallow whole what they say. And that can therefore lead us in a very false perception of who we really are. So moving on to some tips, the first thing is we often have a very incorrect perception of who we really are. So I always say go out and speak to 8 friends, get them to give you 8 adjectives about yourself, positive and negative, because they're probably going to have a better steer if you've got 8 different people helping you assess who you really are. And when you're hearing that voice, that critical voice inside of you telling you you're no good, just sort of make a note. Whose voice am I hearing? Is that my dad's voice, my mum's voice, my grandmother's voice, my teacher's voice? And also try to think, what age am I hearing that in? Am I still a child? Because very often we get trapped back into where the trauma first happened. And I think you've really got to come to terms with it and face it. So what has this low self-esteem cost you so far in your life? What's it going to cost you in the future? How long are you going to sit here and allow these false beliefs to get in your way? And very often we do need, the very first thing is a self-acceptance. Is accepting we are not perfect human beings, no one is, and to actually own our shadow and own our vulnerabilities and be okay with not being perfect. But if we're not being perfect in some areas, by and large, we're going to be much better in other areas. So what I often do with my clients is often do what's called a Christmas tree. I get them to take a particular lack of self-belief they've got in a field. And then it's almost like the Christmas, we're going to decorate the tree with what's the reference experiences? What's the baubles about? Why do you think that you are no good in relationships? Evidence 1, evidence 2, evidence 3. And then what we do, we take each one and we examine it and we look at it. And by and large, we reduce its impact. And in that area, very often we chuck them away. And then we create the new Christmas tree about, I am good in relationships. And then what we can then do is then we can create reference experiences there. And building on that, I'll often do a particular NLP technique, which is called circles of excellence, where we're really starting to actually anchor in and stack positive reference experience with to rebuild our positive strength of who we really are. So that's great stuff. But, you know, fundamentally, I still think there's a very powerful role for psychotherapy here, because it can really help us identify the root cause of the low self-esteem, and obviously can help to rebuild that. Anyway, I hope that helps.